you as a writer have a responsibility in this world to write your stories that you know that you are assigned to do in this world, whether someone reads them in the beginning or not. That is your responsibility. No one else can do that but you. Art is supposed to hold the mirror up to nature, up to reality. And in this day and age, it's like we're holding a warped funhouse mirror up to it instead. That is what separates good writing from bad writing, in my opinion. Are you willing to mirror the truth? Ten writing tips from George R.R. Martin on how he wrote Game of Thrones. Now, I will say, I have actually never read Game of Thrones before. I actually haven't even seen Game of Thrones, period. But let's get into it. See what he has to say.
It was 1991, and just one day, the first chapter of Game of Thrones came to me. The scene where they find the direwolf pups in the summer snows. That scene came to me, and I wrote it in like 3 days. It just poured out of me. I knew they were the summer snows, so this was a place where it snowed even in summer. So what could result that? And, wheels started turning. What kind of world would have that? Where did these people live?
I've known writers who have tried to write for the audience or for publishers or for trends, and instead of just writing the kind of stories they really want to write, the stories that excite them, that interest them, the stories that they lose themselves in.
If any writer is going to write about war, then I want him to treat war honestly. So it irritates me when I'm watching a movie or reading a book, and the hero is going through incredible dangers, him and his 6 buddies, and none of them die. Valor Morgulis, all men must die. I think it's part of life, and art needs to reflect life.
I think another thing I notice is you find just one thing that a character loves or that they hold dear, and then you find the most brutal way to rip it away from them.
Do I do that?
I don't know.
No, I think you have to take your characters and you have to put them through crises. That's what fiction and drama is all about. Is not your hero has a really good time, but things have to happen that cause the characters to question who they are and what their place in the world is and what the meaning of it all is, to go through the dark nights of the soul and times of fear and terror and all of this. I've always taken as my mantra William Faulkner's words in his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, where he said, the human heart in conflict with itself is the only thing worth writing about. I think that's true of all fiction, of literary fiction, such as Faulkner wrote, but also of science fiction and fantasy and historical novels and nurse novels and whatever. I mean, if you have real characters grappling with real problems, the human heart in conflict with itself, doesn't matter if it's in a castle or a spaceship or whatever. If you have that, then you have power, and if you don't, then you don't. And Jamie losing a hand, losing the very thing that he defined himself on, is crucial to I think where I want to go with the character. And he question is, what do you make of yourself after you've lost that? And of course, I have Tyrion now going through similar things. I mean, he's always focused on the things that he did not have, like his father's respect or admiration, or perhaps women didn't look on him the way he would have liked them to look on him, and all of that stuff. But in the aftermath of the events of the recent books, he's now realizing the things that he did have that he's now lost, like the Lannister name and a vast fortune in gold that could allow him to buy and sell anything.
Yeah,
That's so true. I really love that. Yeah, if you try to put your characters through something that's not even real, then what's the point of even writing the book? I mean, if there's this concept these days of like, what is truth? And we all know what we're talking about here. But when people put their characters through these battles, these wars, these trials, these tribulations, and just they come out unscathed, and there's no lesson learned, there's no nothing learned, there's nothing that the reader can empathize with or relate to. And especially in modern culture, there's this whole like shoving messages in people's faces that no one else can really relate to. No one identifies with these cultural themes of today. It's very, very politically correct to agree with them. However, when you start seeing the characters go through something, it's almost like something is it's missing. It's missing because they don't get scathed the same way that no one else really does. They don't go through and get scars the same way no one else really does. And there's just a theme that's overart that's just missing. It's they're missing the axioms of reality. So an axiom is basically a invisible truth that cannot be seen, but without it, society would not be able to survive. Case in point, math. No one can see math. So people say, well, what is math? Well, they'll like draw the number 2. You're like, no, that's a symbol that we use to identify the number 2. What is 2? Well, they'll say, well, there's 2 trees. Like, no, those are trees. Those are trees. You did find 2 trees, but you didn't identify what 2 is. Do you see what I'm saying? You found 2 trees. You drew a symbol that gave a reference to the invisible idea of what 2 is. 2 exists. The number 2 exists. It can exist in different symbols, but they all reference to the same thing, which is 2. You have trees. You have 2 trees, 2 fish, 2 loaves of bread. They all reference to the number 2. However, you cannot see math. We write down symbols to reference it that give the value of what we cannot see. Yet without math, we wouldn't have the buildings we have today. We wouldn't have the foundations upon which this very house that I'm in right now sits on. It would be impossible to define what physics are. Everything in that regard revolves around math. We couldn't survive. In the same way, truth is an axiom that we have to always put our characters through. You put them through something, sometimes they're going to die. Sometimes they're not going to die, but they're going to get probably very, very severely wounded. Sometimes people have to give up people, and no one died. They just had to let them go. You have that grief that they go through. So truth is an axiom that people know exist, and if you are true to yourself, you will know if you're putting your characters through something that's real or not real. It's supposed to be, how Shakespeare says, what is it? The like art is supposed to hold the mirror up to nature, up to reality. And in this day and age, it's like we're holding a warped funhouse mirror up to it instead. So you get rid of the funhouse mirror, you get a real mirror. You have something that you can put your characters through that the reader can identify with, draw in the strength that they got from those characters, and apply it to their own lives when they close the book and put it down.
Just have to echo what everyone else says here. I mean, you write for yourself. I've known writers who have tried to write
Keep the
for
camera
the
steady.
audience or for publishers or for trends, and I've seen them spend years and decades running from one trend to another to try to be successful. I'll write some science fiction, I'll write some cyberpunk. Cyberpunk's very hot. Now I'll write steampunk because everybody likes steampunk. Wait a minute, epic fantasy is catching on. I'll write that. Oh no, urban fantasy. And they keep switching genres, trying to hook on to something instead of just writing the kind of stories they really want to write, the stories that excite them, that interest them, the stories that they lose themselves in. And Pat was right about obsessions too. I mean, For me, one of the things about the Middle Ages that I love is heraldry, and there's a lot of stuff in my book about all the heraldry of the various houses, and I love it. I devote a lot of time to it. I also devote a lot of time to feast. For some reason, I seem to have a certain attraction to food.
I hadn't noticed.
And some of my readers don't like that. It's gratuitous.
Gratuitous eating?
Gratuitous eating. It doesn't advance the plot to know how well the swan was cooked. And well, why do we know all this heraldry? It's too much. I'm not interested in heraldry. And, well, fine. Write your own book, leave out the heraldry. I don't care. This is my book. I'm going to put in the heraldry. And we're not even going to get into the whole question of sex and gratuitous sex. And can any sex really be gratuitous? I don't. I don't think so. But no, you write the things that.
Whoever's holding the camera needs to be reprimanded. Just I don't know. Just this is making me seasick almost. I can't even hardly pay attention to him.
That interests you, you someone who was really interested in plate tectonics. I don't think I'd be lined up to buy that fantasy about a lot about plate tectonics. But if that's what floats his boat, hey, maybe he'll make me interested in it.
Do you like kill?
Okay, that's actually something that really is kind of backs up to the point I was saying a second ago. Make the truth, absolutely. There are different levels as well to what is good for the story, which is not good for the story. Sometimes those boring details are there, but they add an extra, they kind of color in the borders of the picture more. Whereas, sometimes when you write something that's so plot-driven, it's like looking at a picture frame, and imagine all the outsides are blurred to where it just focuses on that one little scene right here, and that's your book. Sometimes it's good to add a few more words. It's fine. Don't add words just for the sake of adding words. But hey, if you want to talk about something that kind of makes the room come to life a little bit more, talk about the smells that the character's experiencing. Talk about the aroma of the goose that's cooking or whatever. Talk about what they taste. Talk about what they see. Talk about what they hear. When I like to write characters, I make sure that they if they're facing a monster, what do they see? What do they hear? Can they smell something that's odorous in the air as the creature approaches them? What do they feel when the monster approaches them? Can they see anything at all in the beginning, or is it just they see odd shapes that are hidden within the shadows? So yeah, sometimes adding in a little more words into your book really does help to sell the book even a bit more and make you feel like you're actually there. It's always good.
Your characters.
No, I don't.
Then
But
why do you do it so much, George?
I do think it needs to be done.
Big fan of death up there. Okay.
Valor Morgulis, all men must die. I think it's part of life, and art needs to reflect life. Particularly if you're writing a fantasy novel, an epic fantasy novel. Certainly since the days of Tolkien, so many fantasy novels have been about war. If any writer is going to write about war, then I want him to treat war honestly. And one thing I know about war from people who served in Vietnam and served in other wars is, it does bring out the beast in men, and anybody can die. It doesn't matter if you're the hero. I think everybody who died in any war thought they were the hero right till the moment that the bullet blew off the top of their skull. So it irritates me when I'm watching a movie or reading a book and the hero is going through incredible dangers, him and his 6 buddies, and none of them die. Maybe one of them gets wounded at some point, but they all survive pretty much untouched at the end. I mean, and Tolkien, which I read when I was young and at a pretty formative age, I think. That book had an immense influence on me. And it does have some powerful deaths in it. My God, I really don't know what's going to happen in this book. Anyone can die. And it became so much more exciting in that point because anyone could die, the peril was real. And that's the feeling I want my readers to have, that if you're going to enter...
Fear is the feeling you want your readers to have. Yeah.
Yes, actually, in a word, if you're going to write about fearful situations, I want you to have fear, and the right kind of fear.
Do you remember what the original...
I believe it was Hemingway that once said, "Don't be afraid to kill your darlings." And that's really a hard bullet for most writers to grasp. It's only because they in a way fall in love with these characters as they're writing them. You know, you spent so much time crafting this incredible character, and then you realize, I'm about to have to kill them off in this area, and I don't want to. It doesn't mean that you have to kill all of your characters. It doesn't mean you have to kill the main characters. It doesn't mean anything like that. You can write a side character that you fall in love with just as much as another one. You can carry that person from like, let's say if you're writing a series, you can have that side character who's been with you for a long time go from book 1 to book 2, book 3, and then at the end of book 4, that person could probably sacrifice themselves so others can get away. But you can't avoid death. You really can't. And the part that really does kind of trouble me, especially for someone who's like more of a faith-based writer, I don't like it when people don't write the truth in a lot of ways. Terrible things happen in the world. You have to be able to have the courage to write the terrible things. It's almost kind of like how so many people try to censor somebody else from saying that one thing. Well, if you start putting a censor on your books, you're no better than they really are. I find that a lot of people that are from like a faith-based community like myself really expect writers to have like no swearing or no sex in their books of any kind. Yet at the same time, those same faith-based people will go off and watch Friends, or they'll watch a fun TV show. I'm not saying it, I'm not saying they go even off watching anything gratuitous, but they go off and they watch things that have those things in it. And hear me out. I'm not saying that you need to add sex to your books or that you need to add swearing to your books in order to get it to sell. If it doesn't call for it, it doesn't call for it. I wrote a romance novel. In that romance novel, I wanted to have some characters in it who went through the severe grief of loss. I wanted there to be a power-hungry, control freak ex-boyfriend. What does a power-controlling ex-boyfriend who's spoiled and rich and mommy and daddy gave him everything behave like? Oftentimes he can behave very abusively. You can't be afraid to write it. It doesn't mean that you have to be gratuitous. It doesn't mean that you have to be extremely detailed with it. You can convey the same emotion at these points without having to be so incredibly detailed. However, ignoring it does no one any good. Your book could speak and relate to the testimony that someone else faced in life, and they don't know how to get through it. Your book could be the thing that they identify with because maybe you went through something similar. Maybe you were good friends or siblings or best friends with someone who went through something similar, and you saw it from that angle. And you were able to write and mirror that perfectly. And then your book has the ability to draw that person out of that darkness by the influence of the characters who went through the same thing in your book. It sounds crazy, but why do we love listening to stories? Why do we love watching series, TV shows, Netflix? Why do we binge these things? Why do we go to theaters? Why do we pay this money to see these epic series and fantasies in front of us? Why do we go onto Amazon and download the next Kindle to our Kindles? Why do we go to Barnes and Noble and buy the next hardback copy of this book or this book? We identify with stories that are true. And in those stories, we relate to specific characters, sometimes more one than the other. And we see how they approached something in darkness. Darkness happened to them, whether they wanted it to or not. They either relapsed and never got back up, or they got knocked down and we watched and cheered them on as they started making their lives better. And they climbed out of that pit that they were thrown into. And that's the beauty of writing a novel. The beauty of good, truthful stories. Not that we try to censor or use constant baby language when we're talking to adults. But we mirrored reality as reality. And we put a character in there that emulated the power of God. He drew from that power from God. He got himself out of that bad situation by taking hold of the hand of God and getting out of it. That is what separates good writing from bad writing, in my opinion. Are you willing to mirror the truth?
The seed of the idea was?
It was 1991. I was actually writing another novel. I was writing a science fiction novel that I'd been intending to write for some time. And just one day, the first chapter of Game of Thrones came to me. The scene where they find the direwolf pups in the summer snows.
That was the first scene that you wrote?
That was the first scene that I wrote, yeah. That scene came to me, and I wrote it in like 3 days. It just poured out of me.
What about it struck you?
It was a scene that haunted me. The characters seemed so real. I knew right from the beginning, I mean, that first sentence, they find the direwolf pups in the summer snows. I knew they were the summer snows. So this was a place where it snowed even in summer. So what could result that? And, you know, wheels started turning. What kind of world would have that? Where do these people live? What is the rest of the kingdom like? And the world building grew parallel to the story. You know, I'm writing a story and someone makes a reference to some king who's been dead 100 years, and I threw a few of those in, and then I said, I better write a list of all these kings, or I'm going to start contradicting myself. So I wrote a list of the Targaryen kings and the names of their reigns, and at some point I said, I better have a map. So I sat down and I drew a map, all while I was still writing the story.
There is a lot of description.
That's really good too. I think I mentioned this in the past, that sometimes the best way to start writing a book is just open up your computer, pull up whatever writing application that you love to use, WordPerfect, whatever, and just start writing. The very first thing that I started writing in my fantasy series was just one scene where a girl, who later came to be known as Virginia, but her name wasn't Virginia at the time, she approaches a balcony stair, looks down, talks to her uncle. Her uncle's going off to get supplies to repair something like with the barn or on the land or something like that where she's staying at. And I knew some of the background of how she got there and then some of the details, but I didn't know everything. And then from there, that came to be a chapter in and of itself. And then I later went back and wrote chapter 1 and made my way back up to that scene, wrote the first several chapters, and then went back and wrote the prologue. So at the end of the day, just start writing and let the story carry you from there. You can worry about adding in some key points or bullet points later on, but for there, just start writing. Drop the sails, hoist the anchor, and just let the wind carry you from there.
Of the saloon inside of the steamboat, or the way to live on the boat. So you worked a lot.
Well, it's, you know, helps the period come alive. My goal as a writer is always to immerse my readers in the scenes that they're writing about, to make them feel almost as if they were living those scenes rather than just reading about them. So I tend to, the old writer's maxim, show, don't tell. I want to show, I want to put my reader in there. I want them to taste the food and see the sights the protagonist is seeing and hear the words that they're doing.
That's perfect. That's exactly what I said a second ago. Don't just describe, let them experience it. So and so smelt this in the room. What is that foul smell? So and so sees this. What is that in the darkness? Does anyone else see those eyes? Something like that. Let the characters describe the scene.
And I can't say I always succeed in that, but that's certainly my goal in the vast majority of things that I write.
I think it'd be fair to say, based on what you just said, that you don't write to a plan. The writing more just, grabs you and you just sort of chase it.
Yes and no. I mean, I do know where I'm going. I know where the story ends. I know the fate of the principal characters. No, I'm not going to tell any of you. But there is a considerable amount that you discover in the process of writing. That's the fun of writing, actually. I've talked about, in many other interviews, about the two kinds of writers, the gardener and the architect. The architect is like an architect planning a building when he plans a novel. He knows how many stories it's going to be and how many windows it's going to have and how it's going to be heated and what the roof is made of and where the plugs are going to be in each wall and et cetera, et cetera. And he works all of that out and blueprints all of that or outlines it in the case of a novel before he drives the first nail or writes the first sentence. The gardener digs a hole and throws in a seed and sort of waters it with his blood and hopes that something interesting comes out. Now, mind you, the gardener knows certain things. The gardener knows whether he planted a potato or a geranium, but and it would be very surprising if you plant a potato and a geranium comes up. But a lot is discovered in the process. I think all writers are some combination of these two, but they tend, according to your personality, to one side or another. And I'm much more on the gardener side. I am, I think like 90% gardener, as was somebody like J.R.R. Tolkien, who, one of my literary idols, who started out writing Lord of the Rings as a sequel to The Hobbit, and it grew considerably. The tale grew in the telling, as he said, as mine has.
And
I discussed this in another video that I posted called I love the way he described that. That's actually really good. An architect or a gardener. That's really good. Sometimes people use the reference either a planner or a pantser. In other words, they either plan things out like the architect or they fly by the seat of their pants like the gardener really does. He made a good point here too, because I truly don't believe that anyone and everyone is 110% one or the other. I do believe what he said's true, that you lean more to one side versus the other. One of my favorite authors, his name is Andrew Clavin. He is a planner. He's an architect. He bullet points and details things out all the way through and through and through and through and through. Then you have people like Stephen King, who are more like pantsers. They have some bullet points that they know are going to happen in the book, but they're more kind of like, where does the story lead? In this case, George R.R. Martin as well. Where does the story lead? And I guess Tolkien too. I didn't know that about Tolkien. That's interesting. But yeah, again, it's one of those things where you have to be honest with the story as well. Sometimes I see things happening a certain way, but then as I'm writing the story, suddenly this bad thing happens to this bad character. I didn't plan on it going that way. And there are times where I think, oh, this character is going to die, and they don't. Another character dies instead, or this person gets shot by an arrow. I didn't plan for that. That literally happened in the moment, and it was good because it added intensity to the scene that was already happening. There's one time where in book 1 where Virginia and Charles are being chased by these bad guys through the woods, and one of them starts turning into this monstrous werewolf kind of beast as they're doing it. He's not fully transformed yet, but he's slowly kind of getting to that stage as they're chasing them. There's a big, huge gunfight that takes place in the woods, and while they're standing at this gorge, they have to jump across it. Well, in the middle of that, there's a gunfire or gunshot that happens from behind them, and one of the main characters gets shot in the leg, and she falls down. It just happens randomly, and they she basically has to be carried across the rest of the way. And that turned later to the wound getting infected. She's having a really bad fever. Then they eventually went to go to this tribe, where the tribe, helped them out with the X, Y, and Z. We got to hear a lot of her backstory later on as well. She got really connected with the character. A lot of those things really just kind of happened as the story went. The ideas will start coming as you start writing. It's almost kind of like you're walking with a flashlight, and or at least it's how it works for me. For me, when I'm writing a book, I feel like sometimes like I'm walking with a flashlight. I know I'm going to eventually reach this point, this point, this point, this point, and this point along the way. These major things that happen, these big, huge things that happen. But between here and there, I have an idea of what's happening. I know what some things may happen, but I don't know everything. But I could see from the distance of my flashlight, like, is that a tree or is that a statue? And as I get closer and as I get closer and as I get closer, I can see, oh, it's a stone statue and it looks like this. And I go forward and I go forward. Oh, is that a tree or is that not a tree? And like, oh, it's a tree. So it's kind of like the the story kind of colors in the details as you go. You can't see fully what's always ahead of you 110%, but you do see how things are going, and then eventually you're realizing, oh, this is how the story's connecting. Honestly, I think that just kind of pays tribute to the fact that all stories from every single author are gifts, and gifts come from a gift giver. And I think it's our responsibility whether we're going to either let those stories be pure and true as they're supposed to be, or are we going to pervert them with darkness? We're the tellers of the gifts. I think we should submit to the gift giver, and you'll find that things work out a lot better for your story as you go.
I want to know if you have any tips on how to write better dialogue, and if you have like some authors that are favorites with just dialogue.
Yeah, writing dialogue is something that Hollywood really helped me with. When you read a script, it has a different format. It's easily researched. If any of you are interested, just buy any good reference book on screenwriting, and you'll see the format. And the dialogue is presented in blocks with much narrower margins. And an experienced screenwriter, as I discovered when I went to Hollywood in 85 and 86 to work on Twilight Zone, they don't even read the dialogue, they just look through. And if they see large blocks of dialogue, someone giving a long speech, they know it's not going to work. This is not Shakespeare where we want characters delivering soliloquies for 2 pages. They want to see short dialogue, a line or two, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's the kind of dialogue that tends to work. The other key to dialogue is reading it aloud. So I'm about to give a reading, I'll be doing that here. When you read your work aloud, you hear the speeches that work, the speeches that don't work. You can get a good feeling for that. So something sometimes looks good on a page, but you actually try to deliver a line and it stumbles.
It's because your work is...
Don't be afraid to write things that are embarrassing or angry or even silly when it comes down to dialogue. You have to make that as genuine as possible. And the best way to do that is to sit back and watch other people talk. You have to sit back and watch yourself talk as well. Be in conversations with people. What are those like? What are those like? Do you have a friend that's goofy? Okay. Have a character in your story that's probably goofy. If you have someone who's really serious and grumpy and rigid all the time, don't be afraid to have that as well. And write dialogue with that person, in your book, how you would have it with that person. One of the best things that he said, though, was reading it out loud to yourself. That's so true. There's actually apps out there where you can upload your document and it will read it out loud back to you. I think I used one actually as part of my editing process. This is not a sponsor, by the way, or anything like that. Although I wouldn't say no to the sponsor. What I did use once as part of the editing process for books I've written in the past was using Speechify. And I would upload my document, select an AI reader for it, and just slow it down enough to where it sounded normal. And it's great. It's really good, especially like I'm a fast writer, but I'm not the fastest of readers, even with my own stuff. I mean, I'll get some. I'll definitely read a whole bunch in like, between this time and this time, sure. But if I'm on a time crunch, one thing that really helps me out is after having gone through one round of editing, upload these chapters one at a time into like a Speechify or some kind of audio playback of sorts where you can hear it read aloud to you while you're reading it on the screen too helps as well. But hearing it read back to you, you can get through thousands of words in like half an hour, 20, 30 minutes at least. You can probably get through like 4 to 6,000 words in about 25, 35 minutes. You can get through multiple chapters. You can complete your book, like listening to it and editing it within just a few days. If you're to go down that path, it really does help having it read out loud to you.
It's so complex and intricate, both of you, that I, wondered how it could ever be adapted in other media. I'm wondering if there are things you wish that they had been able to include that they didn't, or there are things you particularly like, on the other hand, about the way it's been adapted.
Yes, I mean, for most part, Game of Thrones is a magnificent adaptation of A Song of Ice and Fire. But just the nature of transiting from one medium to another, things have to be cut out. I mean, we have 10 episode seasons for everything we've done so far. That's 10 hours. You look at my books, you can't get everything in 10 hours. If you tried to do it literally and included every line of dialogue and every character, you'd be talking 30 hours a season. Now, that being said, I would have liked, and I've said right from the beginning, that I would have liked a few more hours per season. Some of the other HBO shows that went before us, like The Sopranos and The Deadwood, they had 13 episode seasons. So they had 3 more hours. If we'd had just 3 more hours a season, we could have included some of the material that was cut, particularly some of the smaller character scenes that I think would have deepened and enriched the experience. But our show was simply too big. It was already one of the most expensive things HBO did. It was very complex. It's not a show like The Sopranos that you shoot entirely in northern New Jersey. We have 5 crews in some cases that are shooting in Belfast in Northern Ireland, in Morocco, in Croatia, in Spain, in Iceland. It's a huge undertaking, and David Benioff and Dan Weiss, the showrunners and the guy who did most of the work of translating from one medium to another, said to me at a certain point when we were debating this, George, if we had 13 episodes per season, it would kill us. And I like David and Dan, and I don't want them to die, so I stopped saying that we needed 13, but 13 episodes per season would have been good. You're always going to lose things in that process. I mean, my novels are gigantic, but even a novel that is not gigantic, it's hard to get all of it into a movie or even a TV show. Before I made the deal with HBO, I had offers from people who wanted to saw the success of Lord of the Rings with Peter Jackson and wanted to make mine into a feature film. And I had meetings with them, but I just sort of laughed. No, there's no way you get all of my stuff into 2.5 hours. So I'm very glad we chose the path we did. And yes, it had to be HBO. You can't put this on CBS. People would die. They would see a boobie and So no, it has to be.
I think it's different for every writer.
So I've actually never seen the Game of Thrones series. I did see the new Night of the Seven Kingdoms, something like that. I did watch that. That was pretty interesting. I have not read Game of Thrones either. So I do like George R.R. Martin as someone who gives out like writing wisdom and such. Like I used to listen to his stuff all the time. I've never seen this one before. This is my first time watching this. I will say though that as I was writing book 2 of my series, I noticed that it started getting a higher word count than book one. And I thought I knew I wasn't supposed to put this, but I did it anyway. I said, oh, it's going to be about 275,000 words. For reference, book one is 202,000 words long. Again, it's one of those like where I did a lot of trimming back on that book too to get book one to where it was. Book two, on the other hand, as the story started going, I started realizing, wait a minute, this is actually is becoming a bit bigger than book one. But I think it's going to be no more than like 275,000 words long. 275,000. That's pretty good. And the story was like, I knew the points I needed to reach. Remember, I'm guiding it through as I'm going through. I'm like, I know this has to happen, this has to happen, this and this and this all the way through. And as I'm going through, I'm like, well, uh, something's happening here. We're at 300,000 words, and now we're at 350,000 words, and it just starts going further and further. And then finally, I started looking up what is the word count for the Lord of the Rings? What is the word count for this book? What is the word count? I started equating myself to other fantasy books to see like what can I justify the size of this book and what it's coming out to be. And I'm like, well, it's not done. I can't end it here. It's not good. You know, I have to keep going. It would have been almost as weird as me like there was a point where I called my brother and said, hey, look, I need to be honest with you. If the first book of the Lord of the Rings ended when they went to Lothlorien, Gandalf had just died, etc., and they went to Lothlorien to be with the elves of the woods. If book one ended there, would it be good? And he said, no. Book one was about the Fellowship of the Ring. And I haven't seen Lord of the Rings in forever. I haven't watched it in forever. I haven't even touched it in forever. But I'm using this as an example. And he said, no. The first story is about the Fellowship of the Ring. The Fellowship breaks when Frodo and Sam go off and go over here. And when one of their main characters dies. And when the other two hobbits get kidnapped and go this way. And Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli have to go and rescue them. The story kind of ends right there in the Lord of the Rings, where like that's the breaking of the fellowship. This whole time it's all been about this fellowship all the way through and through, and slowly they start getting picked off until it just breaks off. And I realized I couldn't end my story there either. I was like probably like 350,000 words into it. I'm like, I can't end the story here. There's just no way. It would have been the same thing. You know, it would have been like the book one ending like after they made into the woods after Gandalf died, and that would have been the ending of book two. But I didn't end it there. Thank goodness. I kept going with it. But I felt so almost guilty in a sense because book two is more than double of what book one was or is. And so I just started looking up George R.R. Martin, and it wasn't until I looked up the size of his books that I realized, oh, some of his books are like 420 something thousand words long. I don't feel so bad anymore. All right, let's do this. Now, mastering word count is very important as well because, especially if it's your first book, I wrote a romance novel as well, and I did not want that thing to go beyond a certain threshold. Your average novel is going to be about 80 to 150,000 words long. It just depends on what kind of story it is. Is it fantasy? Is it romance? Is it this or that? You know, there's all kinds of things that play into that. For one, I wrote a romance novel, and that was 125,000 words long, as it currently sits. I'm still editing it. I do want to pitch that out to agencies. Go down a traditional path with that one. And if it doesn't work out, I'll probably create another podcast series and release it like how I did the first book and put it out for you guys if you want to read it. But yeah, that's I did realize that with this one, like it wasn't going to be some epic fantasy. It's a standard romance novel, and a standard standalone novel's not going to be 200 and something thousand words long usually, especially if it's not part of a series. What I'm writing right now is epic fantasy. So those are going to be a lot more world building. The other character, the romance book, that takes place in Florida. I don't need to tell you what a car looks like. You already know. I don't need to describe what a restaurant looks like in fullness of detail. You already know what one is. You've been in one forever. I don't need to tell you what a martial arts style looks like. You've seen multiple kinds. You have an idea of what's happening. When it comes down to fantasy, there are a lot of things that you have to describe, especially a new world. I don't need to describe Florida to you know what it looks like. I would need to describe more of what the Northern Kingdom of Earthstars looks like. I would need to describe this culture of people and what that looks like throughout the region. I would need to describe the nations of Unhala Navaya and share how that kingdom got split up and the different civil wars that are happening there. It's epic world building, and that does take more time.
I mean, the one thing that's common for fiction writers, and I know in a crowd this size there are probably a good number of you who are aspiring writers or people who do write or think about writing someday. It's not a career for anyone who needs or values security. It's a career for gamblers because, you know, every time you write a book, you're throwing the dice again, and you don't know whether it's going to crash and burn or whether it's going to be a big success. Most books, of course, are somewhere in between. It's a career of ups and downs, and I've been very fortunate. I've experienced far more ups than I have downs, but I have had a few downs and, dark times where I thought my career was over and I wasn't sure I was ever going to sell another book. What's important to me looking back on those is that even at the times where I was afraid I wasn't ever going to sell another book, I never doubted that I would write another book. And that's the real thing that I think distinguishes a real writer from the false ones, that even if you can't sell the books, you're going to write them anyway because you got these stories inside you that you want to tell. You have these stories inside you that have got to get out, and you got to get them down on paper. And, hopefully you do. Hopefully you persist. But it's a tough gig.
Could not have said it better. Could not have said it better. Writing is such a lonely journey because you want everyone to see what you're building, but they can't because there are words on a page that exist only on your computer. It's easier and more it's so rewarding once it's done, but it's such a lonely journey because for months or years, just depending on what you're writing, you will be writing something in your spare time and no one will be able to see it until you have a draft that's ready to go out to your beta readers. And even then, it only stays in that small little circle. Probably only like 3, 4, 5 people that you give it out to, people that you trust that aren't going to just leak it out to somebody. And even then, you go back and you edit even more based on their notes and their critiques. And you just sit back and you wait and you wait and you wait and you wait. And then you try and pitch it to literary agencies, and then you find yourself being rejected and rejected and rejected and rejected. And then sometimes you make this bold move and self-publish it, and there's these great numbers of people that come in and they just love it. They love it. It's great. You as a writer have a responsibility in this world to write your stories that you know that you are assigned to do in this world, whether someone reads them in the beginning or not. That is your responsibility. No one else can do that but you. Only you. And having the courage to endure that loneliness until the product is done, and then having the strength to endure all of the rejection that you're going to get from agencies, and most of it critical, like some of it very critical, and some of it also very uh, corrective criticism, I guess you can say. Something a bit more encouraging. It's harsh, but they say, hey, change this, and it's going to be really great. And if you do that, and you change this and that, and they love it, good. Sometimes changing this and that goes against your morals, and you can't do that either. So, hey, it's a long and lonely road, but I believe that if you stick with it long enough and you submit it before the throne of God, eventually that is going to break forth from the surface of the earth and sprout into a mighty, powerful tree that it will last throughout the ages. Only if you persist with it.
Things that you learned when you were writing, serial television that would inform your books later on?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, one of the structure of Song of Ice and Fire, with his viewpoint things and cutting between the viewpoints and all of them ending essentially with, I don't know, cliffhangers or interesting points, is a structure I learned in television. You won't see it in my earlier novels, but of course, working for network television, you have to have act breaks. And depending on the structure of the show, is it a four act show? Is it 4 acts plus a teaser, or 5 acts, or is it a teaser and a tag, what have you? But you always have to go out on an act break before you go to the commercial, and it can be a cliffhanger. That's a good act break. It doesn't have to be. It can be just a twist point, or a new revelation, or a piece of information, or something is resolved. But it's if you watch Law and Order, it's always the da 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 moment, where right before the commercial, da 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 da, oh my God, something has changed here. And the idea is to bring you back after the commercial, of course, but it's a good way to end a chapter or an act. And sometimes it's pretty hard when you're designing your story to come up with those act breaks, but that's why you get the big bucks. And it certainly works in the books too. It's keeps people reading. They reach the end of the chapter and they want to know what happens to that character because they're engrossed in Tyrion. But gosh, there's not another Tyrion chapter for a while yet. First, they have to read this Arya chapter or this Jon Snow chapter before they finally get back to Tyrion. And those end. And by the time they finish the Arya chapter, there's kind of an act break there too, and that hopefully draws them back for the next one. So yes.
Yeah. Knowing how and when to cliffhang your chapters is really key and important. I remember when I started releasing book 1 as a theatrical audiobook, I had people write into me, and people into me personally, that said, how could you end that chapter there? I have to wait a whole week before I listen to the next one now. And so, but knowing how to cliffhang a book is also going to be key as well. So what a lot of people that I think don't do right is that a good cliffhanging for a book, imagine just a circle here. You have your entire story arc all the way through, and it touches right back here, but then instead of just colliding back, it doesn't do just that. It keeps going on slightly. So there's a little trim right here, almost like a circle that goes around and has this faint little ledge, as if it's going to keep going on, and then it goes to the next one, and then it goes to the next story, and then it goes to the next story. The great way to cliffhang that is to make sure that that little ledge right there at the top is going to be something that's going to be so key and making them want to continue on with it. But more so than that, they walk away from the story knowing that, hey, this story arc was completed all the way through and through. And it felt good. It felt good. We made a good story all the way through, and then we started this, or our characters are going to go this way. So we know that there's going to be something new coming up. And that excites me for the next book, and then the next book, and then the next book. So, yeah, cliffhanging is a key element to keeping your readers engaged to some level. And I believe there's also different phases where things kind of go down too. Like in book 1, like you can almost kind of tell like different, like I call it like a mount, like slowly rising up to an epic thing, and then it drops down, then it goes to something a little more uh not as aggressive or not as epic and stressful kind of thing. Like if you'll notice, like book 1, it starts off with Virginia going to live with her uncle. Then eventually she meets Charles, and then there are these people that are starting to spy out her house. Who are these people? Why are they hunting her down? Why are they spying her out? Why are they going into her school? And then something really big happens. Some police officers get murdered by these people. Their uniforms get taken. They go to the school to get this girl, and then there's this big huge chase where she and this guy have to run for their lives. And then they make it into this new world, and they go to the tribe of the Naomi. Then it starts over. Now they're at the tribe of the Naomi, and then we see the slow building and slow building. They're still being hunted. They're still doing this. They're still doing that. They meet new characters. They have this big, huge battle. They go to the top of the mountain. Things are very, very scary. There's this big, huge battle at the top of the mountain, and then a new cycle starts, and then it goes through here all the way to the very end. And then so you if you've seen my books, or if you listen to my books, or if you read my books, you kind of know those patterns of what I'm talking about, where things are, or better, yeah, it's kind of like, imagine like a coil, like like a circle going up, but it's like a spring almost, and it's like you complete this stairway all the way around. It makes one huge turn up, and then you start a brand new cycle, and it goes all the way up, and then it goes all the way up again. That's usually how I do my story arcs within the story. Usually there's 3-act narrative through and through, and my goal is to make sure that I always get those act narratives through and through all the way through. There's usually 3. And then for the final third act, you reach that circle, you've completed it, and now you're about to start the new one. Oh, but you got to wait for the next book, because now we're starting down here and then going to the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's book 3. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it if you made it this far. Please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. If you have anything that you agreed with me or disagreed with me with, put it down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And as always, thank you so much for watching. God bless you guys. Peace out.